Hello everyone, welcome today. We're here with Dipika Damerla from Mississauga running for the mayoral candidate. She is currently the counselor for Ward 7. Dipika, thank you so much for taking the time and meeting with us. It's really great to see the race so far and meeting all the candidates. So we are here with the Canadian Muslim Vote. Our mandate is around political literacy and civic engagement, getting more of the word out to the community so they can get to know a little bit about you, about your campaign, and then so today we'll just have a quick chat. But thank you so much for making the time.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I guess we'll start off with a question. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey and your journey into politics.
Yeah, Mississauga's home, and this is where I raised my family, my daughter. I've run a small business here, okay. Yes, and had the absolute honor of serving as the member of provincial parliament for Mississauga East Cooksville. And then I served in cabinet as the associate minister of health and long-term care, and then the minister of seniors. And so that was an opportunity to represent not just Mississauga, but all of Ontario at cabinet for seniors. And then, of course, here as a city councillor. So I have really well-rounded experience, and I feel like everything I've done so far, like my private sector experience, I worked in banking, running a small business, working at the provincial level, executive experience, heading up a ministry, right, and serving on council has really prepared me for today, and I'm ready to lead Mississauga.
That's fantastic. I guess we'll jump right into the questions. The community has a lot of different things that they would like to know about. One of the hot topics right now is housing and affordability. So housing being such a topic where a lot of people are struggling with different things. So how do you plan on creating affordable housing, and do you plan on working in partnership with the different levels of government, regional, provincial, and federal?
Absolutely. So there's two streams to create affordable housing, and one is, of course, where government is hands-on and we subsidize either the rent or we build public housing, and I think we need to do that, but we need the federal government and the provincial government, and especially the federal government, to help us out with funding. Sure. We cannot on the property tax, because you have to keep in mind municipalities cannot borrow, yes, and our only main source of revenue is property taxes. Yes. We cannot build public housing ourselves using property taxes, right? So we need the federal government to fund us, right, or build, and we'll be happy to operate. But then there's also market rental. And we need to make that affordable, sure, as well. And I think there's a role for the federal government, and I like the fact that they've removed HST as an example, so that's going to go some way. As mayor, one of my commitments is to do two things to incent rental buildings, purpose-built rental buildings. The first is I will eliminate all development charges. Now, I will do this without affecting the property tax base, because I'm going to use, the federal government's given us a fund called the Housing Accelerator Fund. So it is about accelerating housing. So I'm going to use that pool to create a fund and say, if you're building purpose-built rental, you do not have to pay DCs, right, and it's first come, first serve, sure, right? So, and the reason I want to do it first come, first serve is I want to incent the people who build. I don't want a situation where someone gets the free DC but then is not building. Right. So it's a finite amount of money, the first few thousand that get built. So that's something is in my power. So I'm going to do that to help incent purpose-built rental.
Do you think that would help with the affordable pricing?
Well, the one thing that, like I said, there's a role for government, mm-hmm, but there's a role for markets. Yes. And one way of reducing rents is to flood the market with more rental options, right? So, yeah.
Some of the other cities have introduced a vacant home tax. Do you think that's something that the Peel region or Mississauga would be looking at?
I know the region of Peel is already looking at it, so I will not be putting another vacant tax at the city level. It doesn't make sense, sure, to duplicate. It'll just cost you so much administration, right? The region of Peel is already doing it. That said, given what's happened in Toronto, the, yes, utter fiasco, mm-hmm, I think we really need to take a hard look at, is this the best way? Right. I support the idea, which is, we want to minimize the number of people who are holding on to homes and keeping them vacant. Right. So I get that. It's not a big revenue generator. We don't want it to be a big revenue generator because we want people to be, every home to be having someone living there. Right. I'm just not sure, given what went on in Toronto, whether that's the best way. So we need to study that better.
Along with housing, another thing that comes up a lot is public transit. So we've seen with the introduction of the LRT, are there any other plans to make transit easier, more affordable, and more accessible, for the residents?
So 3 things.
Yes.
The first is that we need to increase our bus service. You know, city staff always say to us that the best kept secret of transit is actually our buses. They are our workhorses. And people are more willing to take the bus if it comes faster, like service is higher, and it's reliable. So, you know, if it says it's coming at 7:15, it's coming at 7:15. So that's my commitment. You know, we already have a great system. Can we make it more reliable? And can we make it more frequent?
For sure.
The second piece is that, you know, as we grow as a city, one of my commitments is we have to manage the growth.
Right.
It's not enough to build homes. We have to manage this growth. And one thing I do not want is congestion on my streets, because then your city becomes unlivable and you lose God knows how many billions people sitting on roads instead of being with their families. So what I would like, I think as we grow, we are building the LRT north-south, we need east-west connections. So I really think that the Dundas, which is going to be a BRT, east of Huron, Ontario. I wouldn't do anything west of Huron, Ontario, because there just isn't a need for it. But east of Huron, Ontario, I would like to have an LRT instead of a BRT from the Huron, Ontario. And I think, so we really need to start thinking in terms of the east-west connections.
Yes. Okay.
And then the third one is I will be making transit free for seniors.
Amazing.
On the My Way, because that's what we have right now.
That's great. Switching gears a little bit, one of the things that we communities really concerned about is the recent surge in Islamophobia, and we're seeing that people are feeling less comfortable speaking out and even engaging in different ways. What practical steps do you think as mayor that you can take that would help combat Islamophobia, and what have you done in the past to help the situation?
So the City of Mississauga has a committee called the Combating Racism, Discrimination and Hatred Committee, and I am on that committee. And you know, we have some really innovative plans. One of the things that I've been talking about with city staff is, can we make a video?
Okay.
Like a video that talks about getting along.
Right.
You know, because sometimes it's just about repeating that message. Can we get along, right? Something along those lines. So it's not just about collecting crime statistics and hate crime statistics, and all of that is good, but I think we need a charm offensive.
Yes.
I think largely people in Mississauga treat each other well and we all get along really well. Let's work on that. So I think we already have this committee. It's a powerful committee. It has a powerful name. Mm-hmm. We are naming it. So it's not just a multicultural committee. I mean, we are naming it Combating Racism, Discrimination, Hatred. Everything starts with having the courage to name things.
Yes.
So I think this has a very courageous name. I'm serving on it, and as mayor, I will be biggest champion of this committee. I think it has some very powerful work to do. For
sure. And one of the things that we've also seen is with the recent escalation of violence in Palestine, the community is also hurting quite a bit about that. We saw that there was a ceasefire motion put forward, but are there and will you be taking any further steps to help the community heal from such things? And what are we going to do to sort of address the root cause of what's happening?
So, you know, you mentioned the motion and I was supportive of it. In addition to the motion, I did put out public release on my letterhead as councillor when there was talk about Israel, early on when there was talk about Israel doing a ground offensive on Rafah. I just thought that was just not acceptable. So I did put that out, and I definitely support a ceasefire and the release of hostages. And I think, you know, we can all agree that we are not going to solve this problem through war. At the end of the day, this is going to get solved by everybody sitting around a table. You know that, I know that, the world knows it. So the sooner we get there, the better.
Thank you for that. And lastly, one of the conversations that comes around is around refugees. Mississauga is home to many refugees from all parts of the world. What are ways that the city can help support them better, even financially, and how do we create more welcoming spaces for them?
So I think, you know, the city of Mississauga and the region of Peel has done an outstanding job. Our shelters are now operating at 400%. Right. We have homeless people in Mississauga because our shelters are at 400%, right? So we are doing our best to support our refugees and set them up for success, and it's the right thing to do. What we need is a federal government at the table recognizing that the region of Peel gets among the largest number of refugees and support us. We saw Toronto get a deal. I forget, was it $144 million specifically to defray the costs that the City of Toronto is undertaking to support refugees. Where's Mississauga's deal? So I'd like to see the federal government recognize the work we are doing, the costs we are incurring, and at the end of the day, immigration is a federal issue. We need the federal government at the table, and we need them to fund us.
And are there anything that, or any campaign points or anything in your when you come, if you were to come in, where you would think the use of strong mayor powers would be necessary, and would you use those?
My preference would be to not use them. I believe that we have a very good council. Much of the strong mayor powers are around housing.
Yes.
I believe that my council recognizes that there's a housing shortage, so I believe we will be able to work together.
Fantastic. Anything else that you would like for our viewers to know a little bit about?
Absolutely. I'm running to be the next mayor of Mississauga, and there's 3 issues that are paramount for me: tackling the crime, making sure Mississauga is affordable, and the third one is, yes, we need to build more homes, but we also need to manage the growth. If any of you, and many of you work in the private sector, and you know that the difference between a successful company and a company that doesn't succeed is how you manage growth. It's the same with cities. Mississauga is going to grow. The province is asking us to build 120,000 new homes. I recognize that the single biggest thing I need to do as mayor is to manage this growth so that we don't end up in a city that is choked and is congested. We manage this growth, grow smartly. I always say that I moved from Toronto to Mississauga because Mississauga was affordable, but I stayed because it made me feel like I belonged. And I think many of us know what it's like to be made to feel like you don't belong.
Right.
And we all know what it feels like to be made to feel like you belong. And there's nothing, it's priceless, that sense of belonging. And you can have the biggest house, the best job, but if you don't feel like you belong in your city, everything else feels meaningless. And so my commitment as mayor is, it comes from the heart, is everybody in Mississauga. I will work so hard to make sure everybody in Mississauga feels like they belong. It's your city, it's our city.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Dipika, for taking the time to chat with us. June 10th polls will be open, but advanced voting starts May 24th. So please go out and vote. And thank you for taking the time. Thank you very much.